So it should come on. Perfect. And that allows you, it will be sent to you after today's presentation, and that allows you to share that and disseminate that with the relevant members of your team. What we're going to do today, so today's webinar, as I say, we're very lucky to be joined by the Department for Education, who are going to provide an update on the Level 2 qualificatory landscape and how the T-level transition programme will fit in, which is really relevant for you as providers when you're doing your strategic planning. We're going to share emerging practice, so what the current delivery picture is for T-level transition programme. I personally have been here right from the start of initiation, as actually Barnsley College and Havant and South Down have, when it was just a thought of what the T-level transition programme could and would be. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an update on where we are in the position of the delivery at the moment. We're also going to share the support experience that you can get to receive you on this. It is completely fully funded by the Department for Education. It is provided by the Association of Colleges, and it has provided lots of support for over 150 providers across the country nationally, particularly with T-level transition programme, to get them either on the way to their journey or already delivering. So lots of feedback saying that that is extremely supportive, and we do ask you to really encourage you and your teams to get involved in that provider support programme. And to share your expectations as well, what we expect from you, but also what you can expect from us. And there's lots of networking opportunities that you can get involved in and your staff can get involved in. And that's been some of the big actual goals and outcomes of connecting providers across the country, because everyone is going through the same process. I am going to hand over now to Vicky Turnbull from the Department of Education, who is going to talk to you about the Level 2 landscape and where T-level transition programme fits in. Over to you, Vicky.
You're on mute, Vicky.
Oh, I would have to start that way, wouldn't I? I do apologise. So I'm going to start with some scene setting and the streamlining of the qualifications landscape. I'm sure you'll all know that the qualifications review launched in 2018, and it's part of the government's technical education reform programme in response to the Wolf Review and the Sainsbury's Review, both of which highlighted weaknesses in the quality of technical education. So in response to those reviews, we are reforming the qualifications at level 3 so that A levels and T levels become the qualifications choice of 16 to 19-year-olds. These changes at level 3 will be underpinned by reforms to qualifications at level 2, level 1 and entry level. In January of this year, we published details of the new approval process and criteria for level 3 qualifications. Reformed level 3 qualifications will be phased in over a 2-year period. We followed this by publishing on the 20th of April the criteria and approvals process for level 2 technical qualifications that will be taught from 2025 onwards. So getting level 2 and below right is key to making sure that students have a really clear line of sight to level 3 qualifications, apprenticeships, and for some skilled employment at level 2. We also recognise for a small minority of students, their primary aim will be to progress to independent living or into general employment below level 2. So it is worth noting that almost all of the reform qualifications will also be available to adults. So there will be a wide range of qualifications available to adults in future across all levels. Next slide, please, Steve. The Department for Education consultation response published in October last year talks about 17 different qualification groups at level 2 and below that will be considered for funding approval in the future, which I know sounds like a really daunting number, but these groups can be split into 3 main types of qualifications at level 2 that will form the basis of a study programme for 16 to 19-year-olds. And these will support either progression to higher levels of study or entry to skilled employment. The first of these groups includes qualifications at level 2 that support progression for technical study at level 3, including progression for T levels and apprenticeships. In future, some of these qualifications will be designed specifically to support progression to T-levels and will align with the national technical outcomes used in the transition programme. So this is where we fit in. Other qualifications in this group support progression to level 3 qualifications that are delivered outside of a T-level programme, such as level 3 technical qualifications for adults or in subjects that don't overlap with the T-level. So secondly, there are level 2 qualifications supporting progression to academic study at level 3. These will sit alongside GCSEs and can be in the same subject area as level 3 alternative academic qualifications. Finally, there are technical qualifications supporting entry to skilled employment at level 2, which will be aligned to employer-led occupational standards, the same standards that underpin apprenticeships and T-levels. These can be funded in any area where there is a level 2 occupational standards. So it's probably just worth emphasising at this point the definition of technical qualification. So technical qualifications are qualifications that are aligned to employer-led occupational standards and lead directly to skill employment at level 2 or above. So the level 2 technical progression qualifications that we're referring to under the first bullet are not classed as technical qualifications, as they don't meet this criteria, and they don't have to be aligned to a standard. Instead, we are calling them progression qualifications, and T-level transition qualifications fall into this category. So whilst we want to see as many people as possible progress to level 2 and beyond, and recognise that some students will need to start at entry level or level 1, and the focus of these qualifications will be on progression to high levels of study wherever possible. We are therefore funding qualifications which support progression to level 2 and level 3 technical study, and in our consultation we've called these pre-technicals. We're also reforming personal, social and employability skills qualifications at these levels, and we're in the process of working with key SEND, sector and employer representatives to develop national standards against which these qualifications will need to be designed in future. And we will be consulting publicly on these standards later in the year. So we will fund English and Maths qualifications, which are alternatives to GCSEs, and functional skills qualifications and ESOL skills for life qualifications. So the latter will also be funded at level 2. Steve, can we go on to the next slide, please? So this slide sets out the timeline for the reforms at level 2 and below, showing the year in which each type of qualification will first become available for teaching. So to try and limit the burden on awarding organisations and providers while trying to maintain some momentum so that new high quality qualifications are introduced as soon as possible, we are phasing the reforms at level 2 and below over a 4-year period. So cycle 1, if you could have a look at the red boxes, which we launched at the end of April, is only considering the level 2 technical qualifications leading to skilled employment in 4 broad occupational areas: construction in the built environment, education in early years, engineering and manufacturing, and health and science. We only consider occupational entry qualifications that lead to skilled employment in these areas and additional specialist qualifications where they are needed. These reform qualifications will be available for teaching from September 2025. So cycle 2, which is the green boxes, will include all remaining technical qualifications leading to employment at level 2. It will also consider all cross-cutting qualifications such as health and safety, employer proposed qualifications where awarding organisations are proposing qualifications that are in demand from employers, but standards currently just don't exist. These will be available for teaching from September 2025. So next slide, please. Cycle 2, so the green boxes, we will also consider some of the level 2 progression qualifications that I mentioned earlier. So it will include progression qualifications that lead to level 3 technical qualifications that have already been reformed in the previous year. But group 1, progression qualifications that lead to T levels, which is where the T level transition program qualifications will sit, and group 7, academic progression qualifications in the same subject areas as level 3 AAQs that have already been reformed in the previous year. These qualifications will be available for teaching from September 2026. So by the time we get to cycle 3 and for first teaching in 2027, all of the technical qualifications will have already been reformed. So this cycle will include all of the remaining progression qualifications at level 2, as well as level 1 and entry qualifications other than English, Maths and ESOL, and all PSE qualifications. Next slide, please, Steve. So finally, in cycle 4, we will be introducing all English, Maths and ESOL qualifications. So you may recall we had initially intended to introduce reformed qualification in English and Maths and ESOL for teaching from September 2028, following the process to consider updates to the national standards for adult literacy and numeracy. So we have recently decided to postpone the consultation on changes to the national standard until summer 2023. This is also so that we can better understand the potential implications of the Prime Minister's ambition for all students to study maths until the age of 18. We think this is important to fully understand the needs of post-16 learners before making changes to maths qualifications. And this slight delay will ensure that the right qualifications are available to meet the standards of all students, but it does mean that the delivery of the reform qualifications have been pushed back slightly by a year to 2028. So I will pause there, but if you do have any questions on this, please do post them in the chat and we will ensure that we get back to you with responses. So the next slides, if we can now move on, Steve. So what I'd like to do is to give a little bit of a background to the T-level transition programme. So what is the T-level transition programme? The T-level transition programme is a new one-year post-GCSE 16 to 90 level 2 study programme that provides a high quality pathway onto T-level. So it's essentially a prep year for T-levels. It's targeted at learners with T-level aspirations who would benefit from some additional study time and the support that the programme provides them before they then start their T-level. It's really to get them T-level ready. It's not going to be suitable for all. As you can see, it's only one part of the offer at level 2. There's one T-level transition programme for each route rather than a particular individual T-level or an occupational specialism. The aim is to provide a broad introduction to all the T-levels in the route before learners then go on and specialise in the T-level or occupational specialism. So since 2020, we've taken a phased approach to implementing the T-level programme alongside the introduction of T-levels, and we've been working closely with a small number of education providers to learn from their increasing experience of delivering T-levels, and this has really enabled us to understand what makes a really good transition programme to support progression to T-level. And we will be covering some of these lessons learned a little bit later in the presentation. Steve, could we go on to the next slide, please? So what I'd like to do, if we could go on to the next one, it's probably easy if we start with summary of delivery expectations. So what I'd like to just give you is a quick overall overview of the 6 delivery components. So there are 6 integrated delivery components of the programme, which together provide a holistic approach to supporting learners to develop core knowledge skills and behaviours that really prepare them and get them ready for the T-levels, including the important industry placement. So these components include a diagnostic monitoring and guidance component, technical knowledge and skills, English, maths and digital, experience of the workplace, and personal development and enrichment and pastoral support. So what's really different about this programme, as opposed to other study programmes, is that we've been more specific about some of the delivery expectations of these components. And the programme doesn't all revolve around the technical component and developing and acquiring technical knowledge and skills, or a big qualification element. Providers have more flexibility, time and space to really tailor the programme to support learners' specific needs and to address some of the barriers they have to progression to level 2, which is different to other study programs which are built around that really substantial qualification. Steve, if we could go to the next slide, please. So the national technical outcomes are a big component of the technical element. The national technical outcomes set out what providers should cover as a minimum for national consistency in the technical component of the programme. The outcomes are what all learners should be able to know and be able to do by the end of the programme. So the aim of the national technical outcomes is really to provide a broad awareness of the knowledge and skills relevant to a wide range of industries across the route, and they've been developed with close reference to the T-level content to really ensure that they provide the right stepping stone for learning to T-level. So as previously mentioned, the difference with this programme to other level 2 study programmes is that we don't expect the national technical outcomes or the qualification element to be the largest part of the curricula. The NTOs have been designed to be around 120 to 150 guided learning hours, which feels really proportionate to a one-year study programme. As it's not about gaining occupational competence, specific technical skills are not required for progression to T-levels as learners progress directly from their GCSEs. There's no national assessment requirements are there, as these national technical outcomes were originally designed as guidance for teachers for teaching and learning, and therefore contain lots of additional guidance and explanations, including additional context and exemplifications to support stretch and challenge and mapping where English, maths and digital can be contextualised. So the content has been developed. We haven't just pulled it out of thin air. We've been developing this for a number of years through a multi-stage process involving a wide range of organisations, employers, educational specialists and other key stakeholders to ensure we've really identified the right content that provides a stepping stone to T-level and really give learners a taster of what they may expect on a T-level, a type of try before you buy, really to act as a hook to motivate and engage learners to then want to go on and progress to a T-level. So as per the earlier discussion on the new qualification landscape, we have now finished our consultation on using the NTOs. So these in future will form the basis of future qualifications to support progression to T-level as part of that Group 1 category, which are going to be delivered from September 2026. So I will pause there and then pass over to Steph to take you through the next slides.
Thank you so much, Vicky. So I'm just going to talk through where we are now, where we've been and where we're going. And we've been working on the T-level transition programme and so the providers in this room today for around 5 years. That's the pre-year, but also then we follow you all the way the first post-year at delivery. So you have a fully integrated support there for you, and you will have your own personal advisor. I know Steve will talk a little bit more about the holistic, real wraparound support that you will receive as you go through this development journey. Current delivery, with the department have taken a phased approach to implementation, and Vicky's touched a little bit on it there. The thing I like and find most special about the T-level transition programme as an educator is it was an upward policy. So providers had lots of consultation and engagement, and actually we worked very closely with an early group of T-level providers of Wave 1 providers to develop the T-level transition programme. So initially they were given lots and lots of freedom, because we appreciate that the T-level transition programme is about unlocking those barriers that a student might have, because they have the ability, they have the desire to study a T-level, but for whatever reason, they're not quite there yet. And that's lots and lots of different reasons. No two pupils are the same. And so the concept of the transition programme is to unlock those barriers and get those students where they need to be. And you'll hear a little bit more about the different programmes and the different approaches that providers take within that framework delivery today, because we have two very different programmes, but still both T-level transition programmes. We worked, as we said, and we did a phased implementation approach. So we wanted to make sure that we got it right. And we worked very closely and listened to providers' feedback, making the NTOs, consulting on the framework and what it's to include to support, and always thinking about that reverse engineer of what the T-level requires and the skills and the knowledge and the behaviours that success on that T-level requires. And we're all on that learning journey together, because no one had taught it before in the very first instance. So it's been a really exciting journey, and I hope as new providers that you see the T-level transition programme as a really exciting programme and opportunity to deliver with a different lens, not just rebranding or repackaging on level 2, but a real opportunity to grasp a really exciting programme. We now have over 140 educational providers delivering from next September. Either they are developing this year, or we have lots and hundreds of students, not thousands nationally, who are currently studying T-level transition programmes right now in providers across the country. And we're seeing a huge expansion at the same time as we're expanding T-levels. So we did a rolling expansion as that phase with the T-levels in the same manner. Lots and lots of different provider types nationally deliver the T-level transition programme, so we know it works in different provider settings, be that a general further education college, a sixth form college, UTC, schools, academies. So we can draw upon all that previous knowledge of other providers just like you who are currently delivering T-level transition programmes to support you in getting a programme that works for your learners. And it might be that you refine it each year, but our job is to share that knowledge from that phased implementation approach. So hopefully you'll find that really exciting. As we've been delivering this for the last 4 years now, we know some lessons learned that are coming out. And we did some work with NFER, who are a research organisation, to share the feedback of all the providers who are currently delivering. So Neil, and I think Ashley in the room will know that we speak to them very frequently, because we want to get this right. We want to know what works. And so all those conversations are hopefully paying dividends. And this is what the research is telling us from the first year of delivery. We're seeing 6 key lessons that come for providers who are successful in delivering T-level transition programmes. They have close links between the staff and students participating on the T-level and the transition programme. Sounds obvious, sounds simple, but they're often the most crucial things. So get lots of cross-pollination, lots of integration activities where you can, because they want to go on to that T-level. They want to be working at that level. So, and often a student who's gone the transition programme might not necessarily have applied for the transition programme in the first instance. So the more work that they can do together really aspires and gets them to where they want to be. And we see that success and enjoyment. Diagnostic activity, really understanding what is the barrier very early on. And we've seen some absolutely fantastic and extensive diagnostic, innovative practice to really look at the skills, knowledge and behaviours that the students need and monitoring that progress to get them where they want to be. Because as we say, no two students are the same. So understanding where you want them to be on the T-level and then reversing that, engineering that on the transition is really important to getting them and them having a really clear understanding of what they need to do and what areas they need to work upon to get them where they want to be. So that has come through, and we're seeing some, as I say, some absolutely fantastic practice that we can share nationally. We have seen a different approach to different qualifications, and we're going to hear 2 different approaches today. We have seen, I can see there's a question coming, a trend towards adopting a smaller qualification, particularly within certain T-level transition programme areas, routes. And that's because you have the flexibility. You need to think about what your students need, and do your students need a large technical qualification, or do they also need other skills and knowledge behaviours to be developed? And that's where those key components come in, and looking at the component mix as you develop your programme to meet your students' needs. It might be more English and maths, or a different approach to English and maths. We would say things like the construction T-level needs application of math skills, and you can reverse and have the flexibility to do those and give greater time to those skills on your T-level transition programme. So hopefully Neil and Ashley's insight will tell you a little bit about the approaches that they've gone from a qualification point of view. As we've said, we've seen more time for English and maths, and that is a common barrier that students have experienced. So we can see not just more of the same, I would say, instead a different approach taken, the application, those T-level skill competencies that are required in English and maths and in the workplace being honed and developed and confidence drawn. However, we do appreciate the entry criteria as well that you may set may require a student to need additional time to get those qualifications. And it's an opportunity to use to build in some of your time in your programme for that focus. Project-based work, again, we say look at it with the lens of the T-level, and that sounds really simple, but if you're getting a student to a T-level, you need to prepare them and be mimicking what happens on a T-level. And so project-based work is really, really important in that T-level. And so getting them very early, developing those critical skills, independent skills, problem-solving skills, and team working skills. We're seeing a lot of that approach, not necessarily a linear qualification approach, a more holistic approach like the T-level delivery is. And then thinking about the assessment methods. So how are they going to be assessed on a T-level? And then how confident are the students with those assessment methodologies? And can you support them by giving them tasters of those assessment methodologies to assess their progress and really rigorously understanding their position where you need to get them to be? One provider describes it as a personal development boot camp, actually their T-level transition programme, because you don't have a year, you have potentially 9 months to get that student, in all the skills, knowledge, components and the confidence to go out and be successful both on industry placement but tackling that T-level content. So those are some of the trends that we are observing, and you can see from that, hopefully that's got your minds thinking about maybe things that you would like to explore as you develop this programme within your institutions. I'm going to now hand over to the most important people in the room, and that's the providers who are currently delivering, because that's who you want to hear from. So without further ado, I'm going to pass to Neil Johnson, Barnsley College, is assistant principal, who's going to tell you a little bit more about their T-level transition programme.
Good afternoon, everyone. So we started our journey in 2018, 2019, and part of my role in terms of the assistant principal was to include the implementation of T-levels and our transition programme. And as a provider in 2020, we introduced all the 3 available T-levels for digital childcare and construction, as well as the T-level transition programme. We were really pleased to be part of the transition programme pilot. It gave us a really flexible framework and gave us lots of opportunities to think about how to go about it. So as you've already heard, you can currently develop a qualification or a non-qualification model as long as it adheres to the transition programme framework and enables the achievements of the national technical outcomes. Next slide, please. So as part of our pilot, we welcomed the opportunity and took the decision to develop a non-qualification holistic approach. This was all about developing each learner, and we didn't want our staff to be restricted by the qualification criteria or the outcomes, very much being learner focused and the development of the learner. So as part of our initial recruitment, we didn't advertise the transition programme. What we did is we obviously spoke to potential learners, quite often expressing their interest in in the T level or a career pathway where the T level would have been best fit. And then through a series of information, advice and guidance, tasters, diagnostic, we asked our staff to identify transition programme students, those students who weren't quite ready to achieve a T level. They needed 12 months to get there, whether that was in terms of their grade profile, their maturity, their employability skills, work readiness, etc. So in terms of our model, as you can see there, there's several components which align to the ones that's already been shared earlier in the framework. But within our sessions, this was very much about delivering holistic sessions, about having the hook of the subject that the learner wanted to study. So if a study wanted a career in construction, aligned to architecture and a construction T level, then that's a subject that flows through all their sessions. That includes the contextualisation of maths and English, their enrichment, their development of their wider skills. And maths, English and digital flow throughout the transition programme. But we set the challenge to our staff. So for example, one learner may need to really develop their verbal communication, whereas a different learner would be problem solving, another learner might be leadership. And could our staff develop tasks and activities that enabled this, that enabled different students to perform different roles within these tasks and activities to support the development of these skills? And in addition to the transition programme, there was also additional GCSE maths and or English for those learners who needed it, who were required to improve their grade. And as well as that, it gave us the flexibility to support learners to develop the skills towards success on the T level. So one of those being assessment methods. So again, learners coming with a week of profiles. Sometimes it was about their exam techniques. T levels have got a lot of project-based learning in it. So part of our transition programme is about supporting those learners to develop the exam skills and those project-based learning skills. So for example, in an exam, maybe they achieved 45%. That wasn't about whether that equated to a grade 4, 5, 6 or 7. It was a number. And then the next time they would take an exam, maybe they could get 55, 65%, and it was about being better. Their revision techniques, their practice techniques, their actual in the exam experience techniques. So supporting their development, just getting better at the methods of assessment that they needed in T levels. Another example of assessing the wider skills was the intention to use a residential. So using it both as a diagnostic in week 3, where they would go away 4 nights and conduct a series of activities. It was all about looking at that problem solving, that teamwork, those wider skills that are needed for progression, for employability and their development. And then later in the year, a much more challenging residential to enable them as much as ourselves to recognise and identify the level of progress. Now, as I said, we started this journey back in 2019-20, so sadly COVID put a bit of a span in the works with that one, but that's something that now we're going to be bringing back into our curriculum. Next slide, please. So on that journey, there's been a series of developments and a series of learnings that's taken place from our perspective. So one of those was, how did we measure progress? So we were taking a non-qualification approach. So set about developing a knowledge, skills and behaviour matrix, which was informed by LMI, by employers, curriculum experts, and the T-level specifications. But this really became a bit of a beast of burden. There were just far too much, far too many elements. So from this model that we developed, each of our curriculum areas now takes the elements that's pertinent to their industry, to their students' career ambitions, and that's become the focus. And the assessment criteria against each of those skills and behaviours has been simplified to 4 elements, very much supported by evidence in the work they do and professional judgment. Again, our plan was that we were going to have one cohort of learners coming together and one model. In reality, what happened is each curriculum area ended up developing its own transition programme. This led to us having our own bespoke T-level transition programme group, because we were very conscious that while T-levels were on track alongside this, we didn't want our transition programme to be overshadowed by the T-level. And therefore, each of our different curriculum areas were able to feed back into this focus group, and there was a lot of sharing of best practice and exploration of ideas. And again, that's led to some further developments. So where possible, our T-level teachers also develop on the transition programme. One of the benefits this has identified is that they can identify the challenges and struggles that our T-level learners are experiencing. So there might be areas of the syllabus or specification that our staff can see that our students need more work on to enable them to succeed on the T-level. So that's enabled them to go back into the transition programme, and because we have this flexible approach, they can adjust and adapt their scheme of work. They're planning to turn around and say, we actually need to cover more of this subject. We need to put more of this time and energy into our transition students so that when they progress onto the T-level, this will enable them to be more successful and enable them to prepare to progress. In addition to that, we've set up a T-level practitioners group, and we include our T-level transition programme teachers in with this. So this is led by our assistant principal for teaching and learning, and also has a bespoke teaching and learning coach, so that all the CPD content in these sessions meets both the needs of our T-level teachers, but also our transition programme staffing needs. Another area of best practice, which is then filtered from one of our curriculum areas across the piece, is planning opportunities for our T-level learners and our transition programme learners to come together. Quite often this is through project-based learning. It enables our transition programme learners to see what it's going to look like, and it supports their aspirations, enables exposures to the next steps. But best of all, it enables them to speak to the T-level learners, to find out what it's really like. You know, nobody tells it like it was like our students, and they hear the message differently when they're talking to their peers as opposed to when they're listening to staff. So we've seen that each of the curriculum areas has continued to develop their transition programme so that it meets the learner's needs. So as we started off with a non-qualification model, we now have some of our curriculum areas that have got a small qualification or a vendor qualification as part of it, and others have continued on that non-qualification basis. And the ongoing development of the framework and the national technical outcomes already alluded to has given some more focused direction, but while allowing the flexibility of the programme to remain. And again, as already spoken about, there's currently a further off-call consultation taking place, looking at how this will fit into the qualification forms for 2026. One area of development that we think still needs to be resolved is the awareness and understanding of the transition programme. So outside of our immediate IAG, potential students and their parents know very little about the transition programme. We've not heard about it. We've clearly seen development around T-levels and a better level of understanding, but right now it's a case of if we don't shout about it, people don't know about it. And again, I mentioned the fact that we started almost by stealth, but we've now changed our approach where we do at early stages share with students and their parents and guardians about the transition programme and its purpose of development. And furthermore, with regards to our non-qualification approach, it raises concerns around elements of portability. And if one of our students was to progress to a different provider or into employment. So a couple of ways that we've explored and addressed that is firstly very rigorous guidance with the students and the parents and the awareness of almost a 3-year journey towards T-levels following the transition programme. We have our own bespoke Basel College certificate for the non-qualification routes. So that gives an overview of the areas of study undertaken. It includes a detailed tutor reference of the skill development that's taken place, and it's endorsed by an employer in that sector. And that seems to carry a lot of weight in terms of a document that's recognised by the industry. We have a number of level 2 qualifications that already exist, but actually when you look at what is the value of that qualification, quite often it's very little. The value is in the skills that's been developed and the knowledge that's been developed. And that's what we try to get across from our transition programme. And as you've heard, the current review is also exploring the alignment of the national technical outcomes towards the level 2 qualification. So this might provide the solution. Next slide, please. So in terms of progression, what we've seen is that our transition programme supports progression to more than just the T level. And we see this as a real positive of the programme. So while it hasn't lost its purpose, and its purpose is about progression to T level, actually the fact that learners make positive progression onto other elements, we see that as a real benefit. And we definitely don't want it to be a barrier. As you can see there, in terms of numbers, our first cohort was incredibly small, 10 learners, and started that journey, but all of them progressed to level 3, to T levels, to A levels, and to the vocational level 3. And then as we rolled out more of our T levels across more of our subject areas, we had a much greater need and increased our transition program students. So over 300 students last year, and again, you will see that 100% progressed successfully and positively, 76% of those to level 3, including 49 to T levels, and again, the other routes you can see there on the slide. And we've continued to develop that transition programme, and the step that we've taken as we've moved into this year is, again, to really ensure to increase, I think, our focus and our marketing, our guidance to ensure that the transition programme learners have that T level as part of their focus and their career. And that's reduced our numbers to around the 150 mark. And as we are at the moment, we've got more than 40% on track to progress to T level. And obviously we're at this point of the year where we're very hopeful that that will turn into a reality. So a much increased level of progression onto T level. But again, those who are not progressing to T level will be progressing onto other level 3 routes or into apprenticeships or into purposeful employment. So moving on to the next slide, please, Steve. In terms of our transition programme approach, it has been recognised in terms of it's a different type of model, but it's been successful. And as you can see there on the slide, one of 5 best practice case studies, which is promoted currently via DfE and AoC websites. In these sites, you'll also be able to access a wide range of information, support the development of your transition programme, including the framework for national technical outcomes, and examples of how to link these to existing qualifications, if that's your choice. And that's my final point. To summarise, when you're looking at your transition programme, it's really important that you develop it that will be fit for your students. What will your transition programme need to do to ensure your students are able to progress? And obviously, ideally progress onto the T level. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Ashley Group, Assistant Principal of Vocational Curriculum at Havant and South Down College, who's going to share a little bit about their T-level transition programme. Over to you, Ashley.
Thank you, Steph. Yeah, so I'm just going to give you a brief overview, really, of what we started off with in 2020 and how that's evolved to what we're delivering in September of 2023. So next slide, please, Steve. So in terms of our programme in 2020, what did it look like? So we've always felt it was really important to have a main qualification as part of our offer, unlike Neil. And the 2 main reasons for that were, firstly, we're in a very competitive sort of region for colleges. So we've got a local competitor literally 2 miles down the road. And we felt that if we didn't offer a main qual, then potentially students would not come to the college and go to one fairly local to us. So that was the first reason. The second reason was we didn't have the luxury of having a standalone transition offer for early years, for example. So what we wanted to try and do is make a course that met the needs of all of our learners. So we have some students that will know on that level 2 programme that they want to progress to the T level, some that will want to go to apprenticeships, and some will want to go straight out to work. And what we do is we work with those learners to identify what their sort of aspirations and destinations will be, and then code them differently on the ILR. So the students that are on the transition programme and want to go to T level will be coded on the ILR as that, and the ones that intending to go out to work or apprenticeships will have a different ILR coding. In terms of pastoral support, I don't think we did anything hugely different than what we do for students on other level 2 programs. I think there was a bit more focus on one-to-ones to talk about those aspirations and potential destinations. But other than that, probably very similar to what we do with other level 2 students. The diagnostics, as Steph said, there's some really useful tools out there that you can use, and some of these are fairly straightforward. So we use BKSB with all of our English and maths students to assess their sort of readiness for English and maths. But we also use 2 other platforms. So IDEA, if you don't know about it, it's like the Duke of Edinburgh's award, but around digital badging. So we thought this would be really useful to track students' development of digital skills. And then we also used a platform called Navigate. So we've introduced this both with T-level and transition students, and it's really useful tool for tracking their placement hours, but it also has a real powerful employability skills assessment that you can get the students to take at different points throughout the year, and you can then use this tracking system to monitor the students' development of employability skills. So we still use that now, so that's something we've really bought into as a college. In terms of English and maths, I think Steph mentioned this, but this is probably the biggest barrier for us for students not getting onto the T-level in the first place. So we really wanted to try and help support our students get ready for that next step. And so what we introduced was a fast track GCSE reset program. So the first 6 weeks, the students have extra English and maths lessons, and we enter them for the GCSE resets. And if they pass, they do pay for that themselves, but if they pass, we reimburse them the cost of that reset. And then we've also had a real focus on trying to embed English and maths through the project so that students can really see the value of them, so that they're really engaged and motivated. And an example of that, so the early years students focus very much on their project is around what literacy and numeracy is used and how it's developed in their early years settings. The digital students, they had to create their own business and do all the cost plans and the marketing and the promotion around that. So lots of English and maths that they're using inadvertently. I think there's one more bullet point on this slide, Steve. Oh, sorry, no, the work experience. Yeah, so the work experience, we started off planning 2 weeks in to the first year of delivery in 2020. We've actually developed that. So now our students do 4 weeks of work experience on this program. So next slide, please, Steve. So what have we changed? What have we learned, and how have we modified things over the last few years? So one of the things, as we've sort of know more about T-levels, I suppose, we've been able to adapt our TLTP offer to support progression. So an example of this, as you're probably aware, there's lots of science content on the health T-level. So firstly, we've changed our T-level entry criteria for that, but also we're trying to prepare our students more appropriately on that TLTP for health. And so what we've done, where in the past we might have thought, okay, well, the obvious qualification to do for a health student would be a level 2 health and social care qualification. But actually, because of the science that's required on the T-level, we've actually adapted that. So now our students do 2 small qualifications on the TLTP. They do a health qualification, which is focused on care skills, but they also do a science qualification so that they have got that relevant science knowledge for when they progress onto the T-level. In terms of main qualification size, I think, again, Steph mentioned this. We started off in 2020 with a really large qual. I think it's about sort of 450, 480 hours. But actually, we've evolved that over time, and we've taken hours off and made it a smaller qualification so that we can add other components into the program, which I'll talk a little bit about in a second. And we've also done a mapping exercise of the qualifications that we're planning to deliver against the NTOs. So our staff have mapped to see and make sure that the NTOs will be covered by those quals, and then where they're not, then we look to cover them through the project that students complete. Some of the awarding bodies have done that exercise for you as well. So I know, for example, NCFE have done a mapping exercise of their level 2 early years against the early years NTOs, and you can then pick something off the shelf that you'll know will cover the NTOs if the students complete that qualification. Again, I think this was in your good practice slide, Steph. Exam prep, we've done a bit of focus on developing students for the T-level assessments. So we've worked with awarding bodies so that 1 unit on the qualifications on the TLTP are assessed by exams. And we've created like an exam paper that covers the pass criteria for 1 unit on each qualification. And then we've also, to sort of map against the synoptic assessments that students have to complete on the T-level, we do end of term sort of holistic written assessments for the students. So they cover everything that they've covered in that assessment during that term. We've also added what we call a preparation for T-level unit. So that's 45 hours, 1.5 hours a week. And very much focused on what we think the students will need again on that T-level. So the first term, they focus on the skills for assessment. So an example of this would be the health T-level, the employer set project. There's very much a focus on the students being required to conduct research. They then have to interview a case study. They have to be able to do a presentation. So we do lots of work in that first term around developing those skills with learners so that, again, if they transition to the T-level, they've got those skills up their sleeve sort of thing. And then we've also, then term 2 and term 3, the students then do their project. Again, with a bit of a focus on the national technical outcomes if they're not covered through the main qualification, but also just again focused on, I suppose, covering some of those expectations on the NTOs again, so that students really have that skill set. So an example of that, the digital students, they have to work with a client. So they actually interview a real client. They're looking at solving a problem, creating IT solutions for a business. And it also includes a focus on the communication skills as well as the technical skills that are identified on the NTOs. So you can see that over time we've evolved things a little bit to try and sort of emulate what the students would be doing on the T-level. And I'd be more than happy to share some of the things that we've done around that. I think the next slide, Steve, is just an example. Just an example of the study program that we created and how many hours students spend doing whatever and so on and so forth to create that 580 plus study program. So that's everything that I had to share. And yeah, I don't know whether Neil and I are now going to be answering questions, but if anyone wants to contact me for further details, I'd be more than happy for them to do so.
Thank you. Thank you for those 2 wonderful presentations. I think it really helps to bring to life what the framework for delivery is in practice. So thank you so much. I know we've got some questions already come in. I'm going to quickly hand over to Stephen Watterson, who's going to share a little bit more about the support that you will get over the next year as you signed up to deliver a T-level transition programme.
Thanks, Steph. Yeah, I just wish to talk you through quickly the free support on offer to you to help you in your planning of the T-level transition programme, the support from the AoC. So our support here at the AoC is designed to support providers in their planning for the first year prior to delivery and then the first year of delivery. It's done through a number of measures. Each provider will have an advisor to support their planning. Providers will normally meet their advisor 3 times a year, and one of these meetings will be face-to-face if the provider wishes. To support the planning, the provider will also support the completion of the T-level planner, which hopefully you're all familiar with through your T-level journeys, but both Ashley and Neil were part of a working party to actually devise the T-level planner in the first place. And within the T-level planner, there are sections specifically designed to support the T-level transition programme planning. Your advisor is also the first touch point for providers if you've got any questions related to anything to do with the transition programme. And if the advisor can't answer the question, then we will forward to our colleagues at DfE who will get us the response, and then we will share that then with the providers. The advisors will also organise network meetings for providers where they can bring providers together to discuss particular phases of the planning, chair support group in meetings and so on. It's expected that you would organise and attend all KIT meetings and support meetings to ensure that you're accessing the support that you need to plan your programme effectively. The AoC team will also run a series of events, both online and face-to-face, for all providers to attend. Usually in online events, there's an external speaker or a previous wave provider sharing their expertise on a specific matter. The added benefit of the face-to-face meetings is the opportunity to network with people from other providers to share thoughts, challenges and solutions. Again, the expectation is that all providers make every effort to attend these events to ensure that they have access to the support needed for their successful planning. In addition, the AoC also publishes a monthly T-level and T-level transition programme newsletter. This usually features a case study example about a particular provider, but also contains important information from the DfE. If you don't already receive this newsletter, then please email transition.programme@aoc.co.uk, which I'll put into the chat once I finish speaking, to be added to the mailing list. So the next steps for providers, if you, to get started on your transition programme journey, you'll be contacted by your dedicated advisor shortly to arrange a conversation around your initial thoughts on your programme with regards to the planning of your transition programme. And we hope to have these initial conversations taking place before you break up for your summer holidays. Should you wish to have a conversation sooner than this, then again, the email address that I'm going to put in the chat, transition.programme@aoc.co.uk, and somebody will have this early conversation with you to help you on your way. That's all from me, Steph, so I'll pass back to you.
Thank you. And all I can say is that that relationship manager will be a real expert who has come from the field. So we have within our team previous OSTO inspectors, heads of quality, pastoral leads, so a real broad skill set that they can draw upon to really support and help you. And it's always nice when something's free. We've been in education and it's always a double win. So, that is extremely supportive in enabling your staff to get the maximisation of that support whilst it's on offer, because we recognise this is a big strategic change and a really exciting change for you to make. So without further ado, I can see I'm just conscious of time. However, we have had a question that I quickly want to put to Neil and Ashley. It comes from Adam, and Adam said, if this is a level 2 aimed at post-16 occupying 120 hours, what do we do with the rest of our learning time? So hopefully you've explained a little bit more, but there's something maybe that you want to add to that, Neil and Ashley?
So Steph, I would just say that, like I said, we've gone for a qualification, but that mapping exercise against the qualification is quite a valuable process. So then you can meet the NTOs, but also give the students a qual at the same time. I know there's different approaches from other colleges, but that's the approach we've taken.
Thanks, Ash. Neil?
Yeah, from our perspective, very similar kind of without the qualification element, in so much that there's time allocated against development of wider skills, development of mass and English and contextualized, development of employability skills and that work readiness. And when I say skills, these are skills that are being identified by the sector that's relevant in terms of their development, by our expert practitioners, by the T-level specification. So it's given our staff the opportunity to explore the best way of developing those skills. So time to develop their skills in completing project-based learning, in exam and assessment preparation, in work readiness, and then actually conducting their work placement as well. So it just gives that flexibility to be able to do more of something or less of something, depending on meeting your learners' needs.
Thank you. And it's a real, as we say, opportunity that we don't often get, but it's very much an upward policy and thinking about just that student, and rather than thinking about here's a qual, thinking about what does that student need and what are the skills, competencies of that student needs. Thank you. 2 excellent answers there. Any other questions that come in, we're actually going to send out via email the question and answers responses. I want to thank most of all of the panel members today, Neil, Ashley, And Vicky and Steve, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for giving your time. We appreciate how busy you are, and we can't wait to get started and begin working with you on your T-level transition programs. Have a fantastic rest of the day. Goodbye.